Good afternoon. Want to call back into session the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors meeting for April 25th, 2017, and we'll have the clerk call a roll, and then we'll jump into the agenda for the afternoon session. So,
Supervisor Cerna? Here. Kennedy? Here. Peters? Here. Frost? Here. Natoli?
Here.
And you have a quorum.
Okay.
So for item 44, which is your 215 item, well, actually, let me go back to item 43. I do need to have a motion to drop this item. It's the Sacramento County Zoning Code Cleanup Amendments, request to amend the Sacramento County Zoning Code.
Move to drop.
Second. And when we anticipate, even though we're dropping this, just so we know, because I know there have been some folks who have been tracking this for different reasons. So,
Leanne Moffitt, your planning director. We are working on making sure that we can get that on the next planning commission. The item does need to go back to the planning commission real quickly, and then as soon as it's past that, we are working on also getting it back on a board agenda.
Okay, so we'll see it before the break, right?
That is our intent.
Okay, great. Yeah. Thanks, Leanne. Okay. All right. Was there anybody here in the audience that had showed up on the 2 o'clock item that wanted to speak to any of the code amendments? The item is going to be dropped. It'll come back hopefully before the summer break, which would be third week of June, so it'll be back before that. That's the intent. All right, I don't see anybody here. Anybody signed up for it, so okay. And then we'll talk to the issue in our supervisor's comments that may get added to the list. Okay, please vote.
Unanimous vote.
All right, thanks, Leanne. Okay.
Okay, now your item 44 is the ARCO AMPM Watt and Winona PCN project. This is an ABC license hearing to determine whether public convenience would be served by issuance of a Type 20 liquor license to the ARCO AMPM located at the southwest corner of Watt Avenue and Winona Way in the North Highlands and Foothill Farms community.
And I do have a PowerPoint presentation. All right, so this item today, the ARCO is located at the southwest corner of Watt Avenue and Winona Way. The item before you is a finding that the board needs to make prior to the issuance of a liquor license by the state of California. This is for off-sale beer and wine only. Here is the location, fairly close to the newish Walmart on Watt Avenue. There in the red outline. This graphic shows other locations where you can purchase liquor within a 1-mile radius as well as within the census boundaries. Their request is for an on-sale public premises liquor license type 20, beer and wine. They need the PCN because of the approval of the census tract being over-concentrated. And there actually has been an ARCO AMPM here for many, many years, something like 40 years. They did have an unrestricted liquor license, but due to their constructing a new building on site, for reasons that perhaps the applicant can explain, that actually triggered a determination by ABC that it needed a new liquor license. So that does allow us to apply additional conditions if we were to approve the finding. The site is also in a high crime area. The applicant desires to continue to sell liquor so that their customers can have a one-stop option for gas, beer, and wine and groceries. And again, it was the relocation of the construction of the new building on site that triggered this trigger for a PCN. Staff, as we always do, have a set of standard conditions that we apply on business licenses, and we look at each of those, and these are the conditions that we would be applying. There's 2 slides of them. I'm not necessarily going to read them all. I'll let you look at this slide. Have to do with various security cameras and keeping the site clean, and prohibiting certain kinds of signage, and not obscuring their windows, not allowing third-party vendors, complying with noise ordinance, and keeping their trash and recycling enclosures secured. The census tract actually allows only for 3 off-sale liquor licenses. That's based on population, and this is an area that has a certain amount of industrial and commercial activity. And with this one, will be a total of 12 locations. We had one person attend the CPAC meeting. The CPAC did recommend approval. It was on a somewhat narrow vote. It was a 3-2 vote. The sheriff is not in opposition to this, and we do have Chuck Price from the Sheriff Department here if you have any questions of the sheriff. I was asked a question as to whether there are any convenience recyclers nearby, because we have had experiencing problems in the interrelationship between places where you can purchase alcohol and glass and nearby convenience recyclers. There are no convenience recyclers nearby. The closest one is Kirkby and Willarga, and that's one of the ones that is getting phased out per hearings at the Planning Commission, so that one will be phasing out within a year or two. They are within the PBID boundary, and they are a member of the PBID and have been paying. John Sutton is here on behalf of the applicant and is prepared to answer any questions that the board may have. He did provide some email evidence back and forth of his correspondence with the PBID, and that they were actually, upon review of the conditions, were prepared to write a letter of support. However, that exchange did not happen in time, and we do not have that letter here today. But I did see email evidence that the PBID, upon their review of the conditions, was willing to support this. So,
before you leave that slide, could I ask,
absolutely.
The wording on the second bullet says, Sheriff not in opposition to the issuance of an additional off-sale liquor license. Doesn't sound to me like it's really an additional license.
Well, it is a replacement for one that apparently, in the intervening time while they built the building, lapsed, according to ABC. So it is.
I would call it a replacement liquor license.
It's a replacement license, yes.
As opposed to additional.
That would be more accurate wording. Thank you.
Okay. And then another question is, had the sheriff had any difficulties at that location prior to?
I'll have Chuck come up and answer. I presume not, or you wouldn't be recommending approval.
The Sheriff's Department's had...
Chuck, come on to the podium, please. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry.
You know the drill.
Yeah. The Sheriff's Department, in that area there, it's a high crime area with a lot of calls for service in that area. The Sheriff's Department has had calls to that location in the past related to a lot of the things that have been happening in the parking lot or in the vicinity. Overall, the calls for service at that location are not enough that we would warrant an opposition to the issuance of a license.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Thanks, Chuck. Leanne, anything else?
No, I have nothing else to add.
All right. That concludes the report. Yeah, I don't have anybody signed up to speak. I guess we do have an applicant's representative here, so unless there's any other questions by board members, we'll hear from the applicant then. Representative? Mr. Sutton?
Good afternoon.
Do you need to be sworn on these? No.
No.
No, okay, good.
So the existing beer and wine license has been at the location for, I want to say, close to 30 years. It's always been a gas station. The current owner has owned it for approximately the last 7 years. And with Arco's new design, they are building new Arcos. So essentially, it's the same license. He surrendered it with ABC while he was performing the construction, but because he is slightly moving it to the other side of the lot, he's essentially switching the pumps with the convenience store. That triggers what's called a premises-to-premises transfer with ABC. It's still within the same census tract, it's still the same license, but in applying for a premises-to-premises transfer with ABC, that does require what's called a public convenience or necessity for this process.
Okay. Anything else you want to add? As far as conditions, you're agreeable? You're
Yes.
to all the
Yes.
conditions?
The applicant's agreeable to all the conditions.
Okay. All right. Any questions for Mr. Sutton?
No.
All right. Very good. Stand by. And I don't think we have anybody else. Anyone wish to address this item? All right. Seeing none, then I'll bring it back here.
I was, at first when I heard about it, we can sit down. Okay. Thank you. I was concerned because it did say an additional liquor license, which I would not have been in favor of, but this is a reissuance. It's in the PBID area that is in favor of it. and the new building improves the corner, the looks of the corner, and being that they agreed to all the sheriff's conditions, which means liquor sales stop at 10 p.m., and they add security measures, including cameras that are available to the sheriff's department for a period of 30 days, then I would move approval of the license of the item as it stands.
Okay.
Second.
So we have a motion to approve the staff recommendation, which is the PCN, and with the conditions as outlined. If there's nothing further, then please vote.
Unanimous vote.
Okay, thank you. Good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Manuel. Chuck? Okay, next item.
We have 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. We'll recess for 2 minutes. And
What do you want to do?
do
40
appointments.
So do you do
appointments.
nominations?
Do appointments, yeah, do nominations, yeah. Item 46.
Item 46. You are continuing to May 23rd, the Adult and Aging Commission, Children's Coalition, Fair Oak Cemetery District, and the Sacramento County Alcohol and Drug Advisory Board. And for your matters today, Arden Arcade Community Planning Advisory Council,
Please continue to May 9th.
the Antelope Community Planning Advisory Council. Ms. Frost?
I nominate Kathleen Beck and James Simpson.
Okay. Carmichael Old Foothill Farms Community Planning Advisory Council, Supervisor Peters.
Please continue to May 9th.
City County Bicycle Advisory Committee.
Interview's been conducted. We have 2 incumbents that have been recommended by the chiefs. That's John Whalen and Steve and Melvin.
Okay. Developmental Disabilities Planning and Advisory Council.
Again, the chiefs have done interviews, met with, for the public seat, Natalie Gray, and the continued remainder to June 6th.
Natomas Community Planning Advisory Council, Supervisor Cerna.
Yes, I'd like to nominate Jamie Cutlip and Dean Blank.
And then,
Continue the remainder to May 9th, please.
okay. Now for the Sacramento County Mental Health Board, we'll start with Supervisor Cerna.
I'd like to request that the item for District 1 be continued to June 6th.
And then Supervisor Kennedy.
Continue to May 23rd.
And then Supervisor Frost.
Continue, but I'm not sure to what date.
I have a note here for May 9th.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And then Supervisor Natoli.
2 nominations for family member seat, Dimitri Godemine, been interviewed by the chiefs, and also then for the public interest seat, Sylvia Rodriguez.
Okay. Okay, and then that concludes our nominations for today.
All right, now we're back on schedule.
Back on schedule. So for item 45, you're acting as the Board of Supervisors and the Sacramento County Water Agency. Direct staff to proceed with necessary actions to comply with legal requirements to enact proposed monthly rate increases for the Sacramento County Water Agency.
Good afternoon. Michael Peterson, Director, Water Resources Department. The item before you is a proposed 2-year rate increase for the Water Agency Enterprise Zone 40 service charge. The proposed rate increase is the first year would be $2.45 for a flat rate user and $3.96, this is on a monthly basis, for a typical metered residential user. Second year, the proposed increase is $2.58 for a flat rate unmetered residential user and $2.10 for a typical metered residential user. I've got a PowerPoint, and as we get into the discussion, first I'd just like to do a brief overview of Zone 40 and Zone 41 services, the setting for the rate increase, and then also looking back on some of the numerous factors that are influencing the need for this proposed rate increase. And of course, at any time, if you have any questions, please stop me. So the water agency, water enterprise, has approximately 54,000 residential and business customers in its service areas. The water agency provides 2 water supply services, the first being the Zone 40 Capital Construction Service, the second being the Zone 41 Operations and Maintenance System Rehabilitation Service. Billing for the water agency is carried out through the county utility, consolidated utility billing service on either monthly or bi-monthly basis. User fees are generally reviewed every 2 years. The prior 2-year rate increase was before your board in 2015 and was in effect over 2015 and 2016 fiscal years. This proposed rate increase is subject to Proposition 218 notification requirements and a majority protest process. The Zone 40 service area is shown in blue on the map. That is our capital construction service area. And revenues for Zone 40 actually come from 2 sources. One being a developer fee, an impact fee on new development. That fee is not part of this proposed increase, but it is, just for sake of clarification, it is one of the sources of revenue for Zone 40. Zone 40 developer fee funds new infrastructure, the planning, design, construction of new infrastructure associated with new development, not for existing portions of our service area. The other source of revenue for Zone 40 is the Zone 40 user charge. Now, this is a charge that we collect from customers within the existing customers within the Zone 40 boundary. This source of revenue is used strictly for addressing the bond debt service requirement for related to the Vineyard Surface Water Treatment Plant and Freeport Water Project construction. There is no proposed increase to the Zone 40 user charge in today's item. The other service that is provided by the water agency is a Zone 41 service, which is the day-to-day operations and maintenance and rehabilitation of the service, the water delivery system, and the provision of potable water to the customers. The map shown on the screen reflects the area where we do provide potable water. And then there are, in blue, that's where we provide retail services in terms of delivery of water. The green areas, there's one in the Elk Grove Water District and one for Golden State. We provide wholesale water to those 2 districts. But collectively, the Zone 41 user charge is used for the production, delivery, treatment, storage of potable water, the rehabilitation of the delivery system, and ensuring that we're maintaining regulatory compliance as an operator.
Mike, I don't see a green area.
Oh, I'm sorry. Next slide.
There it is.
On the wrong slide.
Yes, next slide. And it also provides funding for the O&M services related to the Freeport intake, because we do operate the Freeport intake on behalf of the Freeport Regional Water Authority. So as we get further into this discussion, I think it's important to look back briefly on what we've been through over the past 5 years in terms of impacts of the recent drought and how that is influencing the item that's before you today. Beginning in 2013, we saw an unprecedented period of drought in this state. Collectively, there was a very severe drought. I won't say that condition existed everywhere to the same degree in the state, but collectively, the state of California was in a drought. As a result of that, there were a number of mandated conservation requirements that were put out by the governor's office and State Department of Water Resources and the Water Board. There was a shift in customer behavior as a result of these numerous years of drought. In keeping with that, there was a reduction in revenue to the water agency and to all water purveyors statewide. And then one of the lasting influences of this past drought is looking ahead to the long-term conservation focus that the state is going to be implementing that will affect each and every water district in the state. Briefly, what transpired during this period of drought was a series of conservation mandates coming from the state through executive order and through subsequent regulations. In 2014, there was a voluntary 20% conservation request made by the state in recognition of an increasing drought condition statewide. And all conservation measures all conservation targets are measured against 2013 usage. So 2013 was the baseline year for water use that the state used to determine conservation achieved. So 2014, 20% voluntary conservation was requested. In 2015, it went to 25% mandatory statewide. In other words, collectively the state all water users in the state have to show collectively a 25% reduction in water use. That very shortly turned into very specific targets for each water purveyor in the state. The water agency, Zone 41, but Sacramento County Water Agency, was assigned a 32% conservation mandate. What that meant was that we had to demonstrate a reduction in use or demand from our customers by 32% over the subsequent year in order to be in compliance with the governor's executive order. We were able to achieve that, and in 2016, our mandated conservation level went down to 24%. Several months after, within 2016, water districts were given the opportunity to take a stress test, if you will, to demonstrate that we had adequate supplies should there be 3 more years of drought similar to the prior 3 years. The Water Agency was able to demonstrate that, and we were able to get out of the mandated conservation levels. And that's where we thought we would be moving ahead. And I'll speak a little bit more about that in a bit. Overall, the impacts from the drought drove a significant shift in customer behavior, and this is statewide. For our service area, between 2013 and 2016, we saw a 22.9% decrease in water use. That's the typical, on a year-to-year basis, the average water use has gone down. Not simply because people are required to, but the mindset has changed with our customers. Now 22.9%, that's overall. We did hit 34% in 2015. We actually exceeded our mandate by 2%. But collectively, our typical water use is down about 22.9%. And the expectation is that it's going to continue, not only because of the mindset shift with customers, but also because of what is in the offing from the state in terms of long-term conservation. And I think that's probably going to be a bigger driver. Let's see. Okay. Change in water use translates to a change in revenue. And in fact, we saw unprecedented impacts to revenue because of the drought, simply because of the reduced water demand, water use through conservation mandates. So the chart on the screen in blue, the dotted blue line shows what was the projected track for revenues at the time we presented the 2015 rate increase. That was sort of a look ahead. That was what was anticipated. Now, if you look at the solid red line, that reflects actual revenues realized through fiscal year 16-17. So not only did we negate, or because of the conservation mandates, that rate increase was negated in terms of additional revenue that was expected to come to the district. We actually saw 2 successive years of year-to-year decline in revenue by about $2 million each year. So the net result is that we're tracking $4 to $6 million below our projected revenues that we had put together 2 years ago. And through the year 2022, this is going to result in unrealized revenues collectively of about $30 million. Now, we're not trying to chase that number and retain it all back with this proposed rate increase, but I think it's important to demonstrate that the drought however real it might have been, the requirement was put upon this district to conserve. We met that requirement, and there's a long-term impact from that. Now, one of the last items, significant impacts from this drought, is the long-term conservation perspective, not only from customers, but more so, I think, from the state. While most water districts have gotten out of the mandatory conservation limit levels, the state is amplifying its focus on conservation. April 7th of this year, final document was released that's called Making Conservation a California Way of Life. The purpose of this document is to implement the governor's executive order from 2016, and is going to focus on several areas on water use and conservation that each water district will have to build into their programs on an ongoing basis. Briefly, permanent conservation. During the drought, we had a number of emergency regulations that were put in place, things like, requiring recycled or the recirculation of water for ponds and pools, automatic shutoff hose sprayers, no water allowed to get on the concrete, no watering within 48 hours after rain. And one of the most visible ones was the ban on irrigated turf within roadway medians. All those became permanent. So those are now permanent requirements moving ahead that will have some effect on water use. Monthly reporting. During the drought, we were also in a period where we had, on a monthly basis, provide reports to the state on water production, conservation, actual conservation achieved, and water waste investigation efforts. Those are permanent. And in addition, we need to include a report on outreach efforts towards conservation to ensure that, so the state will be looking on a monthly basis, what are we doing activity-wise to continue to message out conservation. A new requirement that we will be undertaking is an annual system-wide water loss audit. In other words, we'll have, on an annual basis, audit our system for leaks, determine how much water is being lost, and report that to the state. And that reporting is going to begin in 2017. But after 2017, the state's going to begin a process where specific standards for determining the appropriate system loss for a particular district, the ways to measure and validate that system loss, and then activities that we would carry out on an annual basis to address the water system loss. That is going to become part and parcel to our program moving forward, and on a monthly basis will be something that we have, on an annual basis is something that we have to submit to the state. Water use targets. This is going to be very influential in terms of how we provide service to our customers. The state will be developing water use targets for each water district in the state. This will include an indoor use target and an outdoor use target. These targets will be developed, I don't call them targets, I'll call them standards. They'll be developed based on the region, the climate, the area, vegetation cover, based on some data collected in the field by the state, and then working with each district, asking a district to take that data and develop its own set of standards for what should be allowable water use for its customers, depending on how old the development is, the size of the development, et cetera. While this is not the same thing as a water budget, where there's a strict limit of water use on a monthly basis for any particular customer, this will be a new metric that we will be held to on an ongoing basis moving ahead, that we have to demonstrate that we are meeting our water use standards that are developed through this process. And then finally...
excuse me just a second.
Yeah.
Supervisor Stern had a question.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, what you just explained, Michael, will that, in my understanding of, and perhaps in large part why we're being asked to consider these adjustments today, is the fact that everyone did the right thing.
Yes.
We responded to a drought situation. We conserved water, and the result of that is that our ratepayers are being asked to pay more. There's something fundamentally broken about that model. Is what you've just explained here going to keep us from having to respond in a similar fashion if we were to have an extended period of drought in the future, so that we don't have to ask our ratepayers to pay more because we didn't sell enough water?
This what is being proposed will factor into stability long term. We will have a clearer idea of, there will be a more of a set standard in terms of allowable water use. So that will definitely refine how much water we project to use, which fundamentally...
That's what I'm asking, yeah.
Absolutely, it will. It will. So it will influence, and if it provides more certainty on what we're allowed to use, then it provides more certainty in terms of determining rates.
Are there other water agencies that you know of in the state of California that have been able to avoid this kind of inverse odd relationship between water conservation and higher subsequent rates because they had planned for it differently? They had done something, they had gone through an experience like it in the past where they learned from an uncomfortable, that uncomfortable experience, like the discomfort that I think we're all feeling about this proposal today, given the fact it is in large part due to water conservation. Is there something we should be doing differently other than what you've just described on this slide so that we don't find ourselves in this position again?
What we have always done when we were looking ahead in terms of revenue and rates and impacts to customers is to the best of our ability forecast how much water we will be required to serve our customers, what regulations will be in place that would affect our ability to use that water, and then include that in the overall calculation. What we've seen during this period of drought is a significant paradigm shift. This is something that we have not, at least our district, we have not seen these conditions before. We've never had to face these conditions in terms of rate setting for Zone 41. I know there are water districts in the Central Coast areas that are much more dire straits and have been historically. But what this is doing is clarifying some of the parameters on which we will set rates moving forward. So, as I said, it takes some of the uncertainty out of the away, because we'll starting to focus on allowable use, how much we can use. I think the biggest outlier here was the state's response to the drought. I refer to it as a political drought that affected everybody rather than on a region by region or area by area basis. There was not an assessment there. It wasn't the opportunity for an assessment to be made on, well, how about our own supplies? And then from that, use that as a basis for setting rates. So moving ahead, we're going to have a bit more certainty in that we know the state is going to continue to increase its influence and involvement in our water use and conservation. There's always a certain amount of uncertainty because it's predicting the weather. I mean, that's the bottom line. And
well, I mean, generally speaking, when you're talking about anything that is uncertain that you're trying to project for the purposes of budgeting, the greater the uncertainty, the larger the contingency, right? I mean, that's kind of a standard, reasonable way to plan, right? Yeah. So, is another way to think about what you're proposing here is that we're going to adjust our contingency in terms of the amount of water we think that will be sold versus the amount that historically has been consumed?
Yes. So historically, we've built in 10% conservation. That's sort of been a running mindset. We're looking ahead. We're assuming 20 to 25% conservation as the norm. That's a necessary outcome of what we've experienced, and how we've been influenced by the result, the directives from the state.
Supervisor Cerna, Rob Grantham, consultant who's assisted the department in the preparation of the rate recommendations that are before you today, could perhaps speak in a bit more detail about how other water purveyors in the state are dealing with.
I'd like to hear from him.
Yes. Come on, Rob.
I very much appreciate the question. We basically ask our customers to do a good job, and then ultimately we're raising their unit costs. So to your point,
Now we're punishing them for being good customers, a different way of putting it.
So
We're raising the floor. It seems to me raising the floor and lowering the ceiling on this. When the squeeze, and I don't want to jump out of turn. I want to hear and respond to Supervisor Cerna's, but. As I've thought about this, I appreciate the briefing and the presentation, is that you're cutting back on reward for drought for the conservation. We're going to put in drought pricing, which is going to surcharge folks when things get tougher, speaking to the uncertainty, plus we're raising rates on top of it. I mean,
Plus penalties for violation of the
yeah, and so to Supervisor Peters' point,
right.
I don't know how this is going to feel good to the customers that we serve. They certainly want reliability, and they need our product is essential to everyday life.
Right.
But whatever everybody else is doing, and to me though, we've been chasing rates here for a long time. We'll talk more about that in a moment, but this squeeze is getting pretty tough. I mean, it's like no matter how good you do, you're still doing bad. When it comes to what you're going to pay, and that doesn't feel real good to this side of the dais, at least me. It's problematic, and I know it's where we're at. It's not
right.
Michael didn't create this, but I'm just. I want to hear from you.
But along that same line,
Please.
we raise rates every year.
Right.
When does it stop? When do we even out? Because my understanding is we have decades of water in the ground, and that's pretty hard to understand why we're telling everyone to conserve and then having to raise rates because they are.
And even more in a season like the one we just had.
Right.
Yeah.
We've raised rates 170% in 10 years.
Right.
If we buy into what we have here, and that's my rough math, but that's about what it is.
It's almost 30% in 5.
Yeah. So go find another area where there's been a 170% increase. And certainly, I don't recall any of the boards that I sit on, including this board, where we've anywhere approached that. And maybe we were historically low, accounting for the natural impact here.
Right.
That just. It really strikes me is that, to Susan's point, and Phil, when does it end? You're our hired engineer to look at this, but right. I don't see any end in sight. I don't see this chart anywhere, and again, it's not Michael's doing or his staff, but this news is not good news, and it's not just about a $2 proposed increase. It's about where we're going, because the system ages in place. You use that as one justification. You got the drought, you got this, you got that. I'm going to have a hard time answering customers when this gets, if we go forward with any suggestion that we're going to raise rates, this is going to be a hard one to answer this time around. So anyway, with that backdrop, you can give us what your assessment is elsewhere. So,
and I'll start with, I really appreciate the questions, the concerns, and expression. I work with the biggest agencies in the state, and you're not unique. There is a positive in that you have been forward thinking in terms of your reserves and where you are fiscally for the utility. What we're doing here is much more achievable than what a lot of other agencies are doing. 20% increases, 30% increases. And so being proactive has put you in a better position. So long term, one of the critical components of this process is looking at the fiscal policies and reserves, maintaining those over time so that we can, as you said, weather those normal fluctuations. In terms of the overall cost of water as a commodity, water and wastewater have increased at a higher rate than any other commodity we deal with. Regulations I know you all know the regional, $2 billion worth of investments. We paid for the Freeport project. That was really the major increase that we're talking about in terms of the overall rate increases. There is one saving grace in terms of the overall rate increases. We're talking, separate you noted the $2 or $4 in an increase, and that's a great way to state the increases. Overall, the unit costs are going up at a higher rate, but customers that have conserved, their bills aren't going up quite as much as the unit cost, and so that's an important thing to consider. From a structural restructuring, we are collecting a little more from a fixed charge, which will help long term.
That's subtext that the consumer doesn't care about. They don't, that may be understandable to you and I, the policymakers and everyone behind the scenes.
Fair enough.
To the senior citizen that's on a fixed income, that's academic.
Right.
I mean, that doesn't matter.
Right.
What matters is they have a certain amount that they get off of SSI and everything else every month, and they got to make do with what they have when they have something that's out of their control in the form of a higher bill, and it's cumulative. It's on top of sewer rate increases. It's on top of other utilities. And even if you're not on fixed income, we all know, as much as we appreciate being more or less out of the woods in terms of the Great Recession, wage increases are not escalating at the same trajectory as the cumulative appreciation in utility rates. Right. So, again, not blaming you. You've been tasked with a difficult job. But at some point, the math is what the math is, and we can all go kicking and screaming as much as we want, but at some point, it's just not going to work. And so I guess I have a fundamental question. Is like, what happens if we don't approve the rate increase? Really, what breaks down? What is going to be so fundamentally bad about not raising rates for a year or two?
If I may, Michael, to start with, from fiscal perspective, in terms of burning down our reserves and our bond coverage, we are projecting, based on capital projects, which Michael can speak to, we are looking at issuing bonds in a couple of years that will affect our bond rating. And so cost of capital will be higher. It's something to
Assuming you move ahead with those capital projects.
Correct, exactly.
And then I guess in terms of the
balance,
weighing the different options here, okay, what happens if you put off those capital expenditures for a couple of years?
The biggest, and Michael, if you would speak to it, the biggest is we have about $85 million in a capital replacement of local distribution lines, and so those projects, I'm not sure how much flexibility we have in terms of those upcoming expenditures.
Are those installing water meter lines? Is that what you're talking about?
Distribution lines.
Same thing.
The single biggest influence in our capital rehab program is replacing the system in our Arden service area. It's 50, 60 years old in some places. That is probably the single largest, aside from our Vineyard or Freeport project involvement. That's going to be our single largest improvement or rehabilitation project that we have seen and that we're going to see for quite some time. But we don't have the ability to push that down the road because that entire area has to be metered by 2025. It's the last portion of our service area that is currently unmetered, and we have to get that done by 2025. Now we could conceivably just put the meters in and have the existing system continuing to provide service at a less than acceptable level, and you just drag it out. The earlier you take care of things, the less they cost in the long run.
Mike, why do we leave that one to the end? I mean, that's all in the rearview mirror now, but we went ahead and did Laguna, we did rural communities, we got some grants for some, but we did all these other areas, newer, and maybe they were easier, but again, we spent money, we spent millions. Why didn't we look to an area that was oldest in infrastructure then, still is, in need of the meters? We know metering is coming. Your district, the agency has been good about pursuing that. But why does that lead to the end? And so then we're faced with what we are here today. I mean, it's like we spent millions of dollars in that stuff wasn't 15 years old when we started putting meters in out there. And it may have been less cost because it was newer, but it still would have been newer than what you're looking to try to retrofit now. I guess what decisions, and again, maybe you weren't a part of all those.
The deadline for installing meters in the large part of the Zone 40 portion of our entire service area, the deadline was 2013.
It was a different deadline than
It's a
this?
different deadline based on the identified sources for that part of our service area
Identified sources
of water.
of water.
So we have surface water. That area is identified to have surface water provided. Therefore, the state said, well, if you want to use any of that state water you've got, you need to get meters in by 2013. The Arden service area is held to a different requirement under the law. It says by 2025 you have to have meters. Period. It's not tied to, because that doesn't receive surface water.
They have to be hooked up?
They have to be installed in place, yes.
I'd ask.
And whether they're hooked up or not, it costs the same to install them. But that is a fundamental difference, and we've pushed that project over the past several years. We've continued to slide that out in terms of implementing that project for these very same discussion concerns that are being raised here in terms of rate increases and what are some of the options. But we're getting to the point now that we really don't have a lot of any flex room left. We need to get that project started, and it's slated to start in early 2018, and it's going to be about 5 years.
So of every dollar you charge a customer, how much is for water and how much is for infrastructure and administration?
The vast majority of the cost, I'd say, and I'll do this in terms of, and Rob has ground the numbers, you could be more specific. Vast majority of the costs are fixed. That's related to maintaining the infrastructure that we have in place and rehabilitating it. The amount of cost that varies with how much water is delivered is much smaller. So it's akin to, if you own a house and you're only there 2 weeks out of the year, you still have to pay the whole mortgage. You still have to pay for it to be maintained. And so there's a certain level of system infrastructure maintenance costs that are there regardless of whether you're throwing 100 gallons or 1,000 gallons through that pipe.
What is it, 90-10, 80-20, 70-30?
Yeah.
It's a little over, it's about 5 to 10% is variable, meaning power and chemicals. Most of our costs, I think it's an exceptional question, they're fixed. It's for infrastructure and for personnel, et cetera.
Well, we're asking for percentages.
Yeah, so
you said the vast majority. Is that 90% or is that 60%? 90%.
90%. And we collect revenues from the variable source. It's about 62% of our revenue fluctuates with demand. Around 40%, slightly under 40%, is a fixed amount of revenue we collect. So a much bigger proportion of the revenue is influenced by what is being read on that meter. So we have a disconnect there. We don't collect a fixed amount and a variable amount in the same proportion as our actual costs.
So when the bonds get paid off, will the bills go down?
The bills could go down, and that would be something that we would have to have present to the board, or you use it for the next series of rehab projects. But that's the decision point that you come to. You say, what's the outlook beyond that project?
Theoretically, I guess I should have said.
I know. Never happens.
It's always a first.
Can I just, again, this is in the context of a proposed rate increase, but, it's kind of a workshop, and, we're not killing the messenger here, but this is just, again, we've all had briefings on it and so forth, but, as I said, just tracking this over the last 10 years, long before you were heading to the department, Michael, we had $6 and $8 because we had to bring the infrastructure on. We had to pay for this and pay for that. And then, we did this very conservative estimate. It wasn't your firm that did it, but, about if the bottom fell out, that we'd still have enough coverage. And, well, the bottom fell out, and it fell out a lot bigger than even the most conservative approach. But we've recovered from some of that, and then it's the drought, and it's this, and it's that. But I can't say that, there was 1 year we had a 0 in there, but we had 6 and 8 and 3 and 4s and 2s and all along the line. Now we're looking at 2s and 2s and 3s and 4s, and it just, I don't see any end in sight. I appreciate your chart, and you explained it, and maybe it levels off, but, what been told me a decade ago as a member of this board, and even prior to that, I haven't seen that level off. I've seen 100, 150, 160, 170% increase in rates, and you brought the recommendation, but I, as a member of this board, have been responsible for that, and I'm taking responsibility for it. And that's why I just think that, a very deep examination of where we're going. And again, it's not to question your ability. You want to keep the system in good repair, make sure our customers are happy, all things that we want too. And that's why we've, again, supported rate increases over time. But, even the explanation here about the 18 personnel, I recognize you pulled people off, you did some extraordinary things, so forth and so on. But the system isn't growing by leaps and bounds. You want to do some more this and that, preventative maintenance, all wise if you have the money. But, one of the things is that we can't do it all. We don't do it all anyway. And what I see is this big number out here on the flag that you got to have $75 or $80 million. You got to have the ability to go to the bond market and get the rate. And so if you don't have these rate increases, you board and you community, just be ready, because you ain't seen nothing yet. And I just, I am not, comfortable where we are today. Not because I don't believe what you're explaining. I think you've done a good job of giving us a recap. But again, I guess I don't have faith that we're ever going to see this level out. And again, it won't be my problem forever, because I'm not going to be on this board forever, and we'll change out over time. But I think, not only have a system that's in good repair, but that we've got some certainty. And you're trying to, do this rate exercise here, and I think it requires a broader look. I guess I just turn to you, Nab. I know, again, I've chatted with you, so I don't know, again, still got more presentation, more questions by the board, but just as we sit here today, I'm certainly not, I'm not prepared to take this out for a 218 process, and I know that gets into timing, and then you lose money because you didn't do this. I get all that, but as one member of this board, and again, who has a large part of the constituency that's going to be affected when it comes to ratepayers, that's the other thing that's unique about this, is that we all got a piece of this, a little bit or a lot. And some of us, are going to, stand before the ratepayers in those areas where the infrastructure, where they receive the service, but they're not all, a lot of people get their water from a different district. And so that, for me to be able to explain this and say, well, yeah, there's light at the end of the tunnel, I ain't seeing it, and it'd be hard for me to tell folks that that's the case, because it's just not, it's not there. So I don't know what you might do with this.
Supervisor Natali, kind of stating the obvious, we do not want to proceed with this if there's discomfort on the board. We want to get you to a spot that you understand what the ask is, and if we need more time for us to come back to another workshop, there's a bunch of questions you all are asking, then I think we should come back and answer. And let's do that. Let's come back if that's what the board's will is. More comprehensive look, yes, we can work with Michael and his folks to see where this is going. I think the question that was asked by all the supervisors is that when does this thing end? When is that we're not going to have rate increases? I mean, that's looking at the crystal ball, but I'd like to work with them, see if we can come back and answer that. My advice would be at this point, if the board so desires, that for us to finish the presentation, give you all the information, collect all the questions you have, and then put this back on the agenda and come back and discuss it again.
I'm good with that, because I'd like to see a balance sheet of the department and understand what the reserves are and how many employees and, what costs have gone up. And then I still, it escapes me this continual, for a pun, drip, drip, drip of the water price increases. I just don't get it. It just seems, I don't know if we're using the correct planning tools for that, and maybe we are, and it's just not apparent to me.
We can do that. That's you want a balance sheet, and you want the staffing to.
But I couldn't hear you.
Staffing. You want a balance sheet and staffing.
Just, I don't want to know how many people are in each department. Just what it was over the last couple of years and where it is now, and if we put in newer equipment, can we reduce staff because it's newer equipment and it's more efficient? Those are the, usually as you move forward in this century, machines do more of the work, I'd like to know that. Okay. And I'm like everybody else. I live in one of these zones, and I took out a bunch of landscaping last year and had to pay for that, and now the price is going to go up. It's just it seems like we're banging ourselves on the head with a hammer here.
Okay. All right.
And a lot of people in my neighborhood and that zone are in the same condition. I see people changing out their landscaping every day.
Okay, Michael, got to keep going through? Yeah.
Sure. If we could just finish.
You're on a roll now, Michael.
Thanks, Rob. As we've discussed just previously, we are proposing a 2-year rate increase. And I do want to touch on the idea that, when does this level out? And this may be, again, suggest it's more academic discussion for us versus the customers, but what influences that leveling out is what are the factors that cause an increase in cost? And it's not just water, and it's not just cost of living for staff. Is a district growing? How old is it? Is it fully built out? A Fair Oaks Water District that has no growth needs is looking at ongoing O&M and capital rehab on a much more predictable and consistent basis. That's going to have a different level of complexity than a district that is straddling both an older area and a growing area. And whether there's bond debt that needs to be supported, that also and then I'm just throwing those in the context of when do things level off. When are the influencers of cost stabilize is part of the answer. And so, coming back with some more specifics on that will hopefully help address those concerns. But the real on-the-ground impact from the conservation mandates was a reversal in revenue from year to year over a 2-year period, and ongoing the projected revenue level because of the reduction in use. So we proposed 2 years ago that we needed a rate increase that would get us about $3.2 million additional revenue annually. Well, we didn't see that. We saw double that in the other direction. So it is. I absolutely appreciate it. We're back here asking for about $3.2 million for an increase, but the table has been reset in terms of what that's based on, and it's in terms of predictions. This past 4 years of drought and the state's response to it, I don't think have been reasonably predictable by any
So I have a question.
district manager.
So you've got an increase every year, you're saying. I know this is probably heresy, but if we have all this water underground, can we sell water? I mean, you've got a commodity.
I'm glad you raised that at this.
Well, I mean, I don't want to sell it below the grapevine, but why can't we sell it to Fair Oaks or Roseville or someplace like that?
Regional.
I mean, could we sell it for enough to make up for the price increases and still have enough water for our customers?
Right. The ability to share water within the region is something that...
Sell.
Well, I understand that.
Sharing sounds like you don't pay for it.
No, we actually already have that ability, and we receive some water from the city of Sacramento, and we've made interconnections within the systems of adjacent districts so that we could move water that's purchased from one district to another. So those are in place. You have to look at is there such a demand with our neighboring districts that we could make up this difference? No, we're not gonna. In order to be able to sell this, you've got to find someone who needs it.
So you do have to go below the grapevine.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I don't know. The rates in the other districts in this region are higher than ours, so I wonder if you sell it to them, if they would be buying it at a lesser price than wherever they're getting it now.
So so to do that,
I mean, is their percentage of capital equipment to the price of water the same as ours?
Each one's going to be different, but the 90% plus of your cost is just the infrastructure. And each district's going to have its own setting in terms of age, rehab, the rehabilitation replacement period, and whatever other financial obligations they have. But selling water from one district to another is not going to be a mean. If it were, because we've already identified we have the supply we need, but selling it, but in order to sell it to somebody else to cover our costs, in exchange for a rate increase won't make it marketable, because each other district who might be buying it is going to be factoring that into the cost that they have to pass on to their ratepayers. So there's a sort of an equity in terms of the cost of water between that might be sold or bought between districts. So moving ahead, we did not realize the revenue increase or the actual additional revenues from the prior rate increase, and our year-to-year revenues are significantly down. The work that we were proposed to do 2 years ago, we've held off for 2 more years. We held off on filling those new positions. That meant fewer crews in the field to do the preventive maintenance programs. We've held off on the tank coating reprojects and the well rehab projects and the other capital rehab projects that the smaller ones that we identified that would be funded or supported by the prior rate increase.
Wasn't there a fluoridation surcharge in the last?
Fluoridation surcharge, we had to pay for that.
That was in the last rate increase.
Yes, and we had to pay for that even though we didn't realize that the revenue to support it. So all of that means we shifted $3 million of expense in keeping with the reduction in revenue. That was just a matter of fact. And then looking ahead, we've got to sustain the capacity to do the next big project and projects after that. I think long term we're looking at about a $6 or $7 million capital rehab program once we get past Arden. And that's where you'll see some of this, the rate increase stabilize. But until you get to your system is built out and your costs are pretty well known, that's the point where you're very stable and you have a lot of certainty in terms of rates, because there's fewer things that influence it. But until we're there, we have a lot of variability and uncertainty because of what can influence.
And that'll be decades, if not a century. When you look at the Jackson Corridor,
30, 40, 50 years.
No, at least, Michael. I mean, you just look at they get 30,000 proposed homes in Jackson Corridor alone. You look at what's been approved in Florin Vineyard Gap, North Vineyard Station, all areas that we serve. There's still areas in the north area. I got to imagine that 50 years will go by and they'll still be talking about when the system builds out. I can't, nobody has a crystal ball can tell for certain, but I just don't, the rate of growth anymore, that's part of what we're experiencing here. Talk about what's being contemplated. So you're always going to be out in that system. You get developer fees to do those one-time installs. Meanwhile, stuff is aging in place. And so you talk about lagunas and vineyards and Valley High in this discussion, and it's 30 years in age or thereabouts, but I don't know that anybody certainly in my lifetime is ever going to see even close to build out. And so, how do you counter for that then? If that's where you find stability, at least in one sense, I don't know how you ever get there. I mean, we're all going to hand over to the next generation of folks that are going to be doing what we're doing. I just don't. You're just going to keep chasing it. It sounds like, because you've got this deferred maintenance. You're estimating $7 million, but the system that you now got in the ground is bigger, it's aging, and even with the upgrades, and so you add on to that, and then you're trying to do the new builds and all the developer reimbursements and all that goes with advancing those monies, and don't think the Freeport facility is not going to get old over time,
right?
And the vineyard treatment plan, and so. Again, I don't know. I think part of the discussion when you come back is that beyond just this $7 million rehab, when I see when you redo a well, it's $1 million. That tank coating was $1 million. That tank was only 14 years old, the one there at Calvine Road. Right. And we put another $1 million into maintenance. It wasn't even old by the standards we're judging here. And again, you couldn't, that wasn't your fault again, but it's just, those are types of things that you can have some contingency will take care of the unanticipated. But I guess I had some level of confidence that if that's the marker, then I guess if we accept that as being the marker, it's just when the build out occurs, then you're going to have stability. Then this is going to be exercise in chasing how much can ratepayers and this board and the staff stomach as it relates to rates and what they provide for relative to the dollar flow that comes into the district in any given year. So anyway, next chart.
All right, so we've touched on this previously, but this is the capital rehab expenditure outlook, the two tall bars, that is sort of the core of the Arden rehab project. It does begin actually in 2018, just the initial phase, but really the bulk of the work is scheduled for 21 and 2021 and 2022, and that's supported in part with $35 million of anticipated additional bond revenue.
Yeah, sure, Mr. Stern. Go. I'll just jump in.
Just a somewhat of a rhetorical question, but you mentioned, Michael, that a large part of the increase is to get that last part of the county, the service area in Arden, served and metered and all that, and it's got antiquated conveyance infrastructure. So let's pick another part of Zone 41, part that's in my district, which is non-residential, which is the panhandle,
mm-hmm.
the area south of North Market. It's light industrial, commercial. Of all the rate increases, not just the ones being proposed, projected now, but over the years, of all the rate increases, when's the last time those I could say the same thing about Zone 41 as we're saying about the legitimate need to do what's necessary for Arden. And you know, so in other words, how do I try and explain this to a Raging Wire or a Track 7 a brewery, which is pretty water intensive, so that they understand that we have the responsibility, obviously, to various communities throughout the service area across the county, whether it be Zone 40 or Zone 41, so that they understand that, yeah, it's just a matter of phase or timing, that we have various projected, expected rate adjustments, and we try and address chunks at a time of a conveyance infrastructure need or metering. When's the last time that Zone 41 actually saw some required enhancement to their infrastructure, or saw some benefit to their conveyance system in that part of the service area from a rate adjustment?
I understand the question, and we could go back and try to assign cost, and that would be in terms of maintenance that's carried out, leaks that are repaired, valves that are replaced, etc. And you could
goes back to that 90%
and you could say, well,
fixed cost answer, doesn't it?
You could say part of it is, okay, so the last rate increase contributed to that, but then maybe there wasn't any significant work that happened in that area for the subsequent two rate increases. Because we have a large district versus multiple small districts,
mm-hmm.
you have that, you have an economies of scale in one hand, but you are, from anybody's perspective, you could be seen as disproportionately providing service because each area of that each portion of that service area is in a different condition.
Sure.
So cyclically, you say, you know, over 50 years or 75 years, there'll be this sort of, you know, circling back, and you'll start touching things. But this district hasn't even been providing service long enough for that
Sure.
to even out. But you could assign proportions of prior rate increases to the additional truck and the additional crew that were hired after that increase that did additional repairs there. It would be a very intricate analysis, and still, I think, subjective in the end. You could assign or reassign a cost.
Okay.
But I know what you're saying. There's nothing, not a significant project. Well, you got your big rehab project then.
I get it. Okay, thank you.
So anyhow, this is what's projected for the capital rehab expenses for Zone 41, and we do anticipate, because we don't see an area in a portion of our service area that's in the same condition as the Arden, only because the bulk of our area is newer. This one is just comparatively much older, the way it was built with infrastructure behind the houses, just make this an additionally expensive rehabilitation project. But we don't have the same conditions in other portions of our service area because they are built to a newer standard and the infrastructure is itself newer versus this infrastructure more or less being inherited by a prior entity, from a prior entity. A couple other items that are included in this proposed rate increase is just the underlying methodology for calculating the conservation discount. The conservation discount has been a means for the water agency to provide incentive for customers to conserve, as either as a requirement or as simply a need to manage supply. Obviously, conservation has become much more of a regulatory mandate in recent years, but up to now we've had a pretty straightforward either a 10% or a 20% discount off the bill depending on your use for that month. So the lowest discount or the lowest water use, the customer would receive 20% discount, and then the second level they'd receive a 10% discount, just taken off the bill, off the Zone 41 bill. Given the past 4 years of focus on conservation and mandates, we've had a significant increase in accounts qualifying for the discount, and these are metered accounts. Metered users are the only ones that residential that qualify for a discount. So what we've seen is in 2012 we had 35,000 accounts qualify for our conservation discount. Last year we had 48,000, and we have 54,000 accounts total. So almost everybody is receiving a conservation discount. In order to assign that discount more appropriately to the cost of providing the service, the methodologies that we're proposing is being changed. So where there's instead of a flat percentage, the proposal is, here's a set amount of discount depending on your usage, and then associated with that is call it a per unit or a per 100 gallons discount based on how much was measured through your meter. So the discount is received in a different fashion, and the net result is that for a user, as the example shows, using 15 CCS, which is approximately 11,000 gallons a month, they would see a discount from $367 drop to $295. Understanding you've got more people calling for the discount. And that discount is in effect just an inverse tier. It's an incentive tier versus, but ultimately, however many people qualify for a discount, that affects your baseline revenues, which influences what your overall rate is. So you chase it one way or the other. Everybody gets a discount, and everyone gets a 20% discount. That's great. Well, then your base rate has to go up that much more. So we're trying to spread that out, continue the incentive with, and have it help mitigate the rate increase as much as we can.
Michael, how long is this current? Because we redid this about, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 rate increases ago, where we actually we did some modification, because I remember some of the folks in Elk Grove were not too pleased with the shift to the volumetric and so forth. And I think we instituted as we got more on meters. So has it been, what, half a dozen years since we actually instituted this current one, or is it as recently?
The discount?
Yeah, this current structure that we have with this calculation, volumetric and fixed versus discount.
That comes with moving to metered, so I'd have to go back and find the exact.
But well, if we had to be by 2013, had to have everything metered in those new surface areas. I trust we've done in the last. It seems like every last 5 or 6 years.
I don't want to say. I think 2008, 2009.
Okay, Rod's going to jump out. You know exactly.
Yeah, I think that was when we implemented this approach, because you do have to recognize the fixed costs and the variable costs with the service and assign the charge appropriately.
So we've had it in place maybe 7 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I may, so one of the questions in terms of just the total amount more people qualifying, but also the structural change. Instead of a percentage increase, it's actual a flat change to the meter charge, and then, as Michael said, a unit charge in terms of per 100 gallons used. That modification is to comply with recent case law in terms of Prop 218. And so it's a clarity. It's the conservation discount is still a good, solid 218 compliant approach, but the slight modification is to deal with recent case law and to make it a little more compliant with that recent case law. So, thank you.
What was the case? What happened? Somebody sued because they were getting charged too much?
Just in terms of the tying back to the nexus of cost of service. Okay. So the ethic that we've always implemented, the county has always implemented.
Okay, thanks.
So the additional sort of a new methodology approach that is included with this proposal is the idea of establishing a demand reduction surcharge or a drought surcharge. And this would be something that, in essence, would provide some stability if we were in a period where there was a declared drought or a mandatory, call it a political drought or real drought, where we are mandated to reduce. This would be a tool that could be considered to help stabilize revenue. From a customer's perspective, it's not great. Obviously, that means, oh, we're in a drought, my rates are going to go up, even though I'm using less. It's the same conundrum. But what this does is provides that tool in the toolbox for the board to consider if we were in a situation where, similar to what we were in for the past 4 years. Nothing would be implemented in terms of surcharges unless the board approved it. But what this does is, if you include it in this rate-making process, it is there, it's in code, and it is available should the board decide to use it in the future if we are in a drought situation again.
How does this comport with 218? So in the case of a shortage is one thing, but it's not necessarily a shortage, it's just the use reduction, because it sounds like we're well positioned. So how does this comport with 218 that somehow you're using less? You're not, you don't have an infinite resource here, but you got plenty of water in the ground. It's just because people are using less, we're going to charge you more. So how does that fit the nexus of being fair?
It's a great question. And going back to the previous question, the water is pretty much free. That's infrastructure. And so if we're in Southern California, we can shed half of our costs because we won't buy buy that water. But basically what this does is it keeps us revenue neutral. It's to continue to pay for the capacity, to maintenance of the capacity. And so the question's a good one, but it ties back to the 218 nexus of cost and service provided, because that customer is still going to be paying for their proportionate share of capacity or the infrastructure cost. And so 218 compliant, the difficulty is less for paying more, no question.
Well, because again, I see on the conservation piece of it, and I got to understand the rationale, but yeah. I guess I don't, and I'd maybe turn to Robin and folks, take a look at this at some juncture, because again, I understand the concept, I understand why. Right. Why, if you're the chief of the water agency, you'd bring this forward. But on the other hand, how that fits on our 218 guys, and maybe it's already been proven, maybe there's case law, just as it just seems to me that this, counterintuitive or not, that I think that the nexus becomes, again, not from a legal standpoint, I just see this as being one where, with the ratepayers, it's like, huh?
Well, it provides a legally defensible tool to help stabilize rates during a drought where you've got reduced use. It doesn't force an agency to implement.
No, I know, you says board approval.
It's something that provides the ability to respond in that situation that is in a period shorter than a 2 or 3 or 4 year.
Because in a shortage standpoint, you can go say, okay, we got this issue, we got a supply issue over here. We don't, the wells are going dry, the river allocation's been cut, something systemically. It's different than saying, well, we got plenty of water to sell you, you just aren't buying enough, so we're going to charge you more for what you're not buying.
And those are both two different conditions that could exist, and they have the same influence depending on, if your supply is short and you need every drop, that's an impact to revenue. So that part of the context is if this were being proposed to be implemented in an actual situation, that's part of the context. And the board would have have to consider all that. But what this does is build that tool in the toolbox in the event it is needed, and it is only implemented during that period. And it can't be arbitrary, because again, there have been legal precedent where you can't just arbitrarily say, oh, it's a drought, so we're going to go 25% higher. There's still got to be some assignment, and this would be proposed to allow some mitigation of a revenue impact.
And your assignment is these stages that you've outlined on the slide that's up there?
Yeah,
That's the method you at least outlined. Okay, thanks.
So just overlaying what we're proposing as far as a rate increase, looking out 5 years, the proposed, the two bars there, 17, 18, 18, 19, that would be the collective charge that a resident who pays both Zone 40 and Zone 41 would see on their water bill on a monthly basis. Again, noting that the smaller separate little areas, the Arden and Northgate and those other ones, do not pay the Zone 40 charge. But this just shows you, this stacks them up and shows you what that net bill would be for a customer in both Zone 40 and Zone 41, as sort of a typical metered residential connection. And this is an extremely difficult to read comparison chart of comparable districts in our area and the rates they charge and some of the increases that they have indicated are going to be implemented or are being proposed. And it's it's not necessarily good to say, well, we're less than those folks, but by comparison, you can see that regionally, these similar increases have been implemented for many of the same reasons.
How the numbers are different than the previous one?
Just hold up on this slide.
Because this is a table that's based on 20 CCF per month usage, which was the standard that a lot of these other districts have. So we continued that. It's a comparative analysis for a different level of metered usage. Again, each person's bill is going to be dependent strictly on how much they use. So if you look at 20 CCFs,
yeah.
this is how the bills compare.
How can we use 15 CCFs on the previous chart then? Why was that?
That is our typical usage that we see. That's what it. Again, if I tell a metered resident, your bill's going to go up at $3, it's not. It depends on how much they use. There's always that's dependent on how much they use. For a set amount of use, we can tell you what the bill will be.
Susan, do you have a question?
Yeah, Mike. So maybe I don't understand some of the X's and blanks in this. But I'm looking at the city of Folsom. They're metered, if I understand this right, it's $40.80 that was set in 2013. And it appears there's no increase
Nothing proposed at this point that we were able to get from them when contacting. They don't have any, they didn't indicate any proposed increase in the near future. That's what that means.
I just find that surprising because don't they get their water from Folsom Lake, and they were in big trouble during the drought or worried about being in big trouble?
Yes.
That's your answer?
I won't attempt to analyze their financial basis, but when we reach out to the districts and ask them for the information, what is being proposed in terms of future rate increases.
Folsom has two sources of water. One they do get from Folsom Lake, and the other one is a pre-1911, 1915, I think they call it Fazio water, which is on the north side. So when they do their rates, they're always recalibrating. So they had a problem with the drought, but they had other sources of water that helped them stabilize their rates.
Okay. It seems odd that they haven't had a rate increase since 2013.
And we can come back with some
I'm just trying to compare these,
Sure.
and some of them are really hard to understand. It appears West Sacramento doesn't have any plans to increase their rates, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Now, then we get to Orangevale. Their rate is $36.39. 2016, the rate was set, and they have no plans to increase. Are they mostly well water?
They're groundwater. They receive some from San Juan on a wholesale basis, but that goes into what was discussed prior. Each district, depending on its source of water, whether it's built out or not, whether it's carrying debt or not, that all factors into any particular district's rate setting. So each one of these districts is going to have a different cost basis.
I think when we come back, I think as Michael's point, there's different variables, but we should delineate those for you so you know what's causing
Yeah,
it.
just trying to, I mean, we're all kind of in the same region here, and the rates are dramatically different in some places. And then I see Rio Linda's at 71.73 since 2016, and no proposed rate increases, and they just went through this. They don't have any water in the ground, so I don't understand.
But they
how
do
can
have. But
not
they do have access to water through Sac Suburban through a connection.
Right, Sac Suburban's not too excited about that.
No,
my
I understand
understanding.
that.
So maybe that's an outlier. But then you get to Sacramento County. So this is what your proposal. I'm looking at, let's see.
So compare a customer who's in both Zone 40 and 41, where they've got the sort of the day-to-day delivery of water and the O&M that goes with that. Then there's a separate cost for the bond debt on the large infrastructure at the Vineyard and Freeport. Mm-hmm. You're not likely going to see that in Orangevale or Fair Oaks or another water district that is built out. That's part of the context. There's a whole separate charge that's assigned to something that most of these other districts aren't going to have.
So when does the bond debt go away?
I think
in Laguna. When is it paid off?
I want to say is it 37? I'm trying, where's Susan?
37.
It's 34. 34, 35. So that's when we'll be.
And they should go back down somewhere around what Zone 41 is? Assuming.
It could go back down, or as the unlikely scenario that was expressed. But that would be something that the board would decide. So that debt is gone, and.
I think Supervisor Peters, what that will dictate will be, is there any other need that's needed? Is there more debt that we're going to end up incurring?
Yeah. There's in the distant future, there is the idea of a phased expansion of Vineyard, or there's a rehab of Freeport. Would that be something that Zone 40 rate would be able to continue to support? So once you are cleared that initial debt, it's still there if there's an identified need.
Okay. So basically on this one, I want to know more about why there are some rates that are a lot lower.
Sure.
It sounds like there's a reason, but you can't tell from this chart.
Okay. Sue Frost.
Is there a lifespan for the equipment, the capital improvement, the meters?
Yeah.
And does it outlive the bond debt? And then as soon as you pay off that bond, or do you turn around and will we have to, what is the lifespan of the equipment?
Well, if you want to talk about the distribution system, you want to assume at least a 50-year life. And that's 50-year life on something that we build now. The older stuff didn't have that service life, so we've been patching it along. Meters, though, no, you mentioned a meter. A meter's not going to last 50 years. A meter may last 2 years, or if they have failures. Those are something that we replace on a much more frequent basis. But the large-scale infrastructure, looking at a 50-year life, that's reasonable.
And so when you go out, did you have more to say about that?
No.
Okay. When you go out and you sell bonds, are you looking at fixed rate bonds? in view of possible inflation?
That is a decision that is going to depend on the economic conditions at the time, and so whatever is going to be the most realistic and sustainable debt to carry is something that's going to be assessed. But that's not. That would be something that Rob or the folks in our county's debt office consider, our CFO in our department. Those are things that they consider in that analysis.
He's shaking his head like he might have something to say.
Typically, we do use fixed rate debt. I mean, we've had variable rate debt where it makes economic sense, but typically it is fixed rate. Your question with respect to the lifespan, the meters can last 15 years or more, but that, as Michael's saying, is that's a quicker replacement cycle. The $85 million we're talking about in terms of the Arden service area, really that's about the pipe, the long-term assets.
Underground?
Correct. And so that's the majority of the cost.
And do you partner with the
15 years from
transportation and other cities when you're doing that kind of infrastructure to maybe share some of those expenses at the same time they're doing roads?
We do coordinate in terms of installation. We don't share expenses. We can't share expenses, but if we are, as we will be doing with the Arden project, we're going to time that in conjunction with the Department of Transportation to ensure that we're not tearing up a road that's been recently paved, or that it will align so that a subsequent paving project will come after ours. But we do also build into our project rehabilitation of the pavement in the area that we've worked to ensure that at the end product, not only underground but on the surface, is improved from the existing condition.
So given the recent funding that's possibly going to come down for roads, if you did delay funding and delay infrastructure capital improvement, it could in theory be bad for having to tear into new roads that had been placed down.
That has to be factored into the scheduling of our project, absolutely. And there's
so
some,
you're all communicating with each other.
On the large or small capital rehab projects, that is a regular part of the project vetting process to ensure that if we see this project, we don't say, hey, we're going to do this date. Oh, we never checked with transportation. No, that is something that happens early on in project scoping to ensure that we don't have that conflict.
Yeah, Supervisor Frost and larger.
Hold on. Supervisor Frost, on the question on variable rate debt, it will, recommendation if we do ever issue variable rate debt in this county, it went away pretty heavily. I think one of the things that you embedded, I think your question was when we did briefings with you when you came on, a lot of the financial issues the county ran into was the use of that kind of debt, which you can do if you have pretty good cash reserves. And we are not very cash rich, so our recommendation to you most likely will be fixed unless there's a way we can demonstrate to you that there's a way we can save money. But we've learned our lesson from it, the overall county debt structure, airport, and I believe water also had it. And in the last 10 years, what we've been doing is systematically going in and replacing the variable rate debt with fixed debt. So just want to let you know that we're very, as Michael said, our debt people look at it very closely, and that is a type of debt that we do not want to kind of replicate the issues we've had in the past.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Rob.
Yes, Supervisor Frost, I was going to speak to your question regarding water projects, water infrastructure, and relationship to roads, road condition. Michael spoke about the internal communication that we have within the county organization. We also have a protocol set up with other water purveyors in the county in regards to impacting roadway surface conditions, and when there's a project, how we can pool resources to provide the best possible roadway service at the end of that project, be it funding for road projects combined with the budget that may be in a water infrastructure project that's there for restoration of their trench work. What we try and do is leverage those resources to provide the best road at the end of the day, regardless of who's doing that water project in the road within the county.
Yeah, because, I mean, in Carmichael, the roads already have a lot of the holes are already in the road, so it's easier to dig
Install
into
pipe?
it, I think, but.
Shove the pipe in there now?
But with gas and water and the roads, it seems like there would be some shared expenses, or it'd
There's
be
some
less expensive to work
opportunities
together.
to leverage, projects going in at the same time or close to the adjacency of the project timing. And there's a utility coordination process that our designers and the other project engineers for the other utilities participate in. And part of it is to sort of look ahead. How can we align projects to the degree that project needs can fluctuate to accommodate that. Sometimes it simply can't because the urgency is of a project, but that is something that is part and parcel to that on-range scoping.
Thank you.
Michael, just real quick before you get to the next slide. I've been thinking here as some of the questions come forward and this has been talked about, in past years, and you addressed it, a few minutes back, but it has been alluded to that, somehow we can kind of grow our way to stability with more connections. And I think to your, candid point a little while ago about, you're not going to have certainty or stability until you get to pretty much build out. But I recall, again, maybe not with you, but certainly with, your one of your predecessors that there was, well, when we get to, we get past that 55 to 60,000 connections, we're going to be in better shape. Obviously, you're going to have more money, but you got more responsibility in the system build. And it seems to me that premise really, unless you get to the end game, it's not there because, it goes to what you have in place, what life expectancy is and how much you can milk beyond that. And so it doesn't matter if you have 50,000 connections or 75,000 connections. Again, I don't see the clarity for how that's ever going to help us. And so, I don't think, unless there's a sweet spot that either you or Rob see as being, you calculate a number of permits because that's how you build the system, and then you can figure, what your capacity is relative to wells or surface water delivery. But beyond that, if the commodity is really not the or the supply is not the issue anymore. It's all that fixed, what you said very early on in one of the questions, that fixed infrastructure. So if we never added one more connection, we're not going to probably be much worse off than we will if we add 25 or 30 or 40,000 more connections over the next 50, 60 years, or better off. I mean, it's going to be relative because of what the system is. And if your supply isn't the concern, and thank goodness we've been, fortuitous, I think, in the work that, you and your colleagues have done relative to Freeport, certainly on the surface water side, but also, we have, bountiful water, but we need to manage it, with conservation in mind. Is there a counter to that, or is that in essence true that it doesn't really, connections doesn't really help you?
Well, I don't think that's just generally true. Yes, obviously more connections is more revenue, but connection growth certainly doesn't keep pace with the cost of maintenance on an annual basis, and a lot of that is driven by are we providing the appropriate frequency and level of maintenance to a system, or do you pull back? But so much of that is influenced by how many connections each year. Well, it's 600, 700, 800 connections a year. Yeah, I mean that's not enough to sustain the cost due to age and rehabilitation needs.
And the obligations you take on because you got more distribution system, every so many units you got to have another well for redundancy, and that's $1 million, $2 million every time you put a hole in the ground with every development of that well.
And we've had, we've been in a period where we put large infrastructure in, funded by development, but it's cycled through, speak to the tank,
right?
That it needs rehab. Well, that falls on the existing customer base. So there's where you don't have that proportional escalation of costs and revenue growth just from connections. So perhaps there's a different model to fund that, but then that becomes a separate discussion.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so finally, this is
You already showed this slide.
No, this is a different.
This is everything.
Different slide.
This is the full bill.
This is looking at.
About 4 slides ago. I've got 2 of the same thing. Are you sure you didn't?
I hope not. No, that was the prior one.
It was a water rate projection of this one?
Yeah, maybe there's an error in the.
It has the exact same amounts on it.
Oh,
No,
okay.
Oh.
looks exactly the same. Okay.
So this shows the existing, proposed, and projected Zone 40 and 41 rates, along with the sewer district rates, the stormwater utility, and solid waste, just to see for a customer who receives all those services billed through CUBS. This is just sort of the overall amount that they would be seeing on a monthly basis. It's been a comparison that's been used in the past.
This would largely be some of the Arden area that Susan represents and Vineyard area that Patrick and I share would receive these bills in their entirety. Elk Grove has their own garbage service. Now is their city, their corporate city, Rancho Cordova likewise, but
right.
They get a portion of this, but they're in the unincorporated areas. There are neighborhoods and communities that would get this full bill, $326 a month, every other month bill from the county of Sacramento, where we're.
Right.
Yeah.
So just finally to recap the proposed increases for the 2 years. It's completely recognized by staff the conundrum or the irony of coming out of a period of mandated or real drought and conservation, less water use, meaning good response by customers, and then falling into one of the wettest winters on record, 16-17, which I think, speaking in one of our briefings, people's memories fade very quickly when there's too much or too little. So the difficulty in trying to explain and rationalize a rate increase in this situation is compounded. Looking ahead, though.
Very well stated, Michael.
I'll have to go back and watch the tape and see exactly what I said because I can't remember. But looking ahead, we know that we're going to be held to task to use less water. And we know that we have increasing costs for maintaining and operating the infrastructure. And we are not at a point where it's stable yet. We don't have enough control of those influencers on our system to be able to do that. Regardless of the rate that we charge and the revenue we receive, we carry the goal to manage the operations and maintenance and the financial administration of the service that we provide as efficiently, as effectively as possible. And it is extremely difficult to predict exactly what's going to happen, and that I appreciate the concerns that have been expressed. I echo them myself. We need some more money, and we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, that's, when you water it down, that's really what it comes out as. But we know the impacts that we've seen from an absolute political mandate over the past 3 years that had nothing to do with our supplies. Nonetheless, we had to continue to carry operational costs and defer projects to maintain our financial position. And there's a number of decisions that were made in the past that I think were well made in terms of the debt we carried in order to have the infrastructure that we have now. And that is just part of the complexity of the setting that we're in. If you have any other questions, or like County Exec indicated, we'll take those questions and come back to you as you desire.
All right. Thanks, Michael. Thanks for your presentation, for the preparation, and certainly for fielding the questions, you and Rob both. There may be some other questions. We do have one person signed up to speak. There may be others, but
Okay.
board members.
I will just put up,
Okay.
that was the proposed schedule. Just
Probably a little slippage in there.
for the sake of the Prop 218 process, I want to get that up there.
Okay. No, thanks for that. So, again, good presentation. So, any questions of Michael before he gets seated? Okay, I think you're good to go. You can keep going. Thanks, Mike. All right, so I have one speaker signed up, Karen Klinger. Karen? Good afternoon, Karen.
Can't help but shake my head with these departments that always want the customer's money. And you know what? I appreciate, Serna, all of you who've spoken out. This is ridiculous. Look at the people on the street. Why do you think they're there? Because they all want to be there? I don't think so. Do you know, every time there's an increase in water, sewer, garbage, what happens to the rentals? The landlords have to raise rents. This has to stop here, and I hope you oppose this right now, because you don't have money. What do you think about the poor? What do you think about the poor? It's time you take a diet. And the diet is to sell every property they don't need, and that would start with 920 La Sierra Drive. I believe that's the correct address, where there were 3 private property owners that had offers in, very good offers, by the way. And why did the Sacramento County Water Agency need it? To store chemicals? We don't want those chemicals. We don't want them in our neighborhood. We want that turned into a private property, because those property owners were willing to turn it into a very interesting property. They can sell property. They want us to sell our property because we can no longer afford to live in Zone 4041. Water meters, they talk about a flat rate. No matter how much water you use, there's going to be a flat rate like there is in the city of Sacramento. Whether you don't live in your house for a week, you still pay that flat fee. Something has to change, and I think the big change came in the late 90s when the county created an uncity for those of us in the unincorporated area. You created a city, even though you're a county, because you provided municipal service that we have paid highly for. I don't want services. I would rather hire my own people when I need something done. County services were like in the 90s for water, sewer, garbage. Now, what are they? $280, $290 for water, sewer, garbage in my neighborhood? I don't want you guys anymore. I love you. It'd be great to have the service probably, but your rates are too high. You need to have competition, and there is no competition. So this seems like it's a Ponzi scheme. Every time the state and the county ask for money, it's like they really don't need it. They need to pay for something else. Now, when they borrowed bonds, were any of those capital appreciation bonds?
I don't think they were. We sold bonds in order to, not only were capital appreciation bonds. I think we went to the bond market. They were to fund.
Well, you never know. You should ask the county.
We can ask.
I don't believe so. If they were, we have refinanced them and we've taken them out of our portfolio.
Okay.
Well, you had a penalty if you did, because capital appreciation bonds, you have a huge penalty that exceeds anybody's imagination.
Okay.
So if that's the case, include that in your question as far as financing. I also had included, I do have a copy of opposition to this. I think it's agenda item 45.
Right, it got circulated, Karen. Have you sent it through the email, that one?
And then I also, well, but I don't, I'm going to give this to you again because
Okay.
I made marks, but I also want to tell you that I'm very concerned about water meters. All of this has to do with water meters. I believe I had it shown to speak after the meeting on water meters. I want hearings scheduled for those of us in Zone 4041 who do not have water meters now. You can see I have lots of questions. The people will have lots of questions. You know, when there's a notice, people don't get the daily recorder. We don't get a notice when there's going to be fees, assessments, new taxes, or whatever, utility rate increases. And the very people who should be here aren't here because they can't even tune into this. They're trying to make a penny, a dime, a nickel. To them, that's a lot of money in some cases because it may make the difference on what they can add to what they can buy at the grocery store. So I can't tell you how I'm just not enchanted with this new uncity that the county created in the late 90s and the 2000s. It's sinful, it's immoral, and let's get back to the water meters, though, because I think, will you, the Board of Supervisors, please consider scheduling a hearing prior to any form of water meters being added in the Arden Park area? We have large lots, very deep lots. And you can see from the questions I have, I'm sure there are tons of others that have.
Okay.
And I also want to speak on an off-agenda item, too.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Very good. Thanks, Karen. Okay. We'll get back to the off-agenda in a moment. All right. Anybody else here to speak on this item? If not, then next steps, Mr. Gill.
Members of the board, what I would like to do is we have questions that you've asked. Let us sit down with staff and come up with a new timeline and then come back to the board.
Okay. All right. So we're going to drop the item for now? Is that the intent?
I think the intent will be you received a report today.
Received report? Okay.
Received report, and you've given us questions we have to follow. We're just going to schedule with the clerk when we will come back to you.
Okay. What do you anticipate, 4 to 6 weeks?
I believe so, for at least 4 weeks, but I want to consult with the department and make sure that it's within the timeline we can answer the questions you have.
All right. So for today's purposes, we just receive and file, no further action required, not continuing to a date certain, but we will be back on the agenda in the May or June timeframe we anticipate.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Very good. Any other comments? No action needed, Madam Clerk? Okay. All right. Thank you, Michael and Rob, for your information presented today and for your presentation, and we'll see you back again, I'm sure, next few weeks on this item. Okay, that takes care of the published agenda item. I know we've got, Karen has requested to speak off agenda. We have some adjournments, and we got some supervisors' comments, and so I don't know what order. Let's go county exec, supervisor comments, then we'll take off agenda, and then we'll come back to adjournments.
I do have one county exec comment. Is when we were reviewing the zoning code, there's an issue that's come up on the tattoo parlors, and there's a desire expressed by Supervisor Natoli for us to come back with an ordinance or an amendment to the zoning code. I just want to make sure that the board's aware that we're going to start working on that and come back to you in the near future to have a discussion about that. There's some issues that we've had with it, that there's a desire to look at it. Should this be a use permit? Is existing rules sufficient? If they're not, what other rules can be put in place? So I just wanted to solicit board input to make sure that you all are aware that we're working on this item.
Okay, thanks, Dan. And again, I know it's just the idea to have a discussion around that and whether a use permit will be appropriate or not. And obviously, it's for this board to decide. We take it up in that discussion at the time you bring it forward. So, okay. All right, anything else on your comments? Okay, let's go to board member comments, starting to my left and moving this way.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have just passed out to you and my other colleagues here a packet of information, including a cover memo. The subject of the cover memo is hash oil abatement ordinance. I am here with, because it's not agendized for full discussion and consideration today, requesting our county CEO and county council to please come back at our very earliest convenience, hopefully by May 9th, in fact, for a draft ordinance for this board to consider that addresses the growing problem of honey or hash oil home processing here in Sacramento County. This is a chronic problem, in my estimation, that has not only plagued Sacramento County for a number of years, but other California jurisdictions, mostly in Northern California. And just briefly, this is the home processing of a very high concentrated form of cannabis into an oil extract that requires as its principal processing agent butane. which is a very, very highly flammable substance that is heavier than air. We have a number of instances in Sacramento County where butane vapor has sunk to the floors of homes and concentrated and sought ignition sources such as hot water heaters. And even static electricity is known to ignite what is a very volatile situation. Having discussed the subject with our local fire chiefs, they are expressing a great deal of support and certainly prepared to provide testimony at the right time in support of such an ordinance. This is a case where we don't necessarily need to invent the wheel. Like I mentioned, there are other jurisdictions in Northern California, such as the County of Shasta, City of Anderson, City of Chico, City of Eureka, that have considered and adopted these ordinances that would regulate regulate the sale and availability of butane in various quantities by certain types of retailers. So going to give this a great deal of thought. I will tell you that in my district, in the South Oak Park neighborhood alone, there are instances of convenience stores, liquor stores essentially, where you would think that the sale of butane in high quantities would not be something that you'd find on their sales floors, is actually occurring. In fact, they're selling butane in some cases what appears to be by the liter behind their cash registers. So this is the same neighborhood that has also suffered from a rash of residential home fires over the years. Don't have any proof that one is necessarily connected to the other, but regardless, there's plenty of media reports included in the packets that I just distributed to you that document the result of the use of butane and the home processing of hash oil here in our county, and I think it's high time that we give this the consideration it deserves to do something about it. So that is my expression of interest, formally so, to our county CEO, and I look forward to continuing to work with our county council's office and his office to bring back something to the board shortly.
Okay, thanks, Phil.
Mr. Chair, what we're looking at tentatively will be on May 9th at 3 p.m. So if that time does not work, we'll communicate back.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, good. Patrick, any comments? Susan, any comments? Sue? Okay, I just, before we get to the off agenda, I just, one follow-on, particular note, and there was an article a few days back, but I know I've had a couple of inquiries, and I talked with our planning director, Leanne Moffett, about it, but there's been some interest expressed in tiny house communities and, you know, how we accommodate those currently under ordinance. We either do it through a mobile home park or subdivision and or through just your typical subdivision, but I think that as we look at, you know, some of the housing challenges along with housing opportunities, and, you know, again, I don't know there's a way to assess the need necessarily, but I know I've been approached at least by one party down in the southern part of the county, not far south, but who has been, you know, looking with, you know, talking with some landowners about the opportunity to do that, and maybe in a fixed situation versus in the mobile situation. So I just wanted to kind of throw that idea out there. Mr. Gale doesn't need any immediate report back, but I've shared it with Leanne, and I know in our briefing on Monday, some interest, and so I think it's probably worth at least looking into, and maybe it's well accommodated in the marketplace already. So. All right, and I do have some adjournments, but we'll hold on those for a moment. So, Karen, off agenda item, you wanted to address the board on. Good afternoon once again.
Good afternoon. You know, when you're old and you have a chance to come time and time again here, you remember the way things used to be, and I want it to change. I want legislation to come back before the people. Now it's behind closed doors, so that back door has to be closed, and that open door right here in front of these chambers, these supervisors, all of you here in this room, need to let the people know who you are, and you are defined by legislation that is presented to you, local level, state, federal level. We need to know what you're doing. We need to know what your thoughts are. There are bills out there that are so horrendous. Senate Bill 18. You're supposed to be receiving legislation that's going to have an impact on the county. This is a bill that could have huge negative impacts to the county. Religious freedom, liberty, parental rights. You need to be made aware of this. And I'm not too sure if the analysts that you have, they could very easily be a partisan political group and doesn't want the public to know how you are defined, what you support, what you oppose. I want you to bring back, if you will, transparency to these chambers, and by doing so, I think you'll have I know the people will feel better. When I come before you, most times I don't have trust for staff like the ones that before Mike Peterson, because they lied to us about that building where we would not be charged. There would not be a bond taken out on that building on La Sierra Drive, and there was. So when there isn't trust, when doors are closed, there isn't transparency, we come here angry, upset, concerned that we're not represented. And I do hope that you will bring every month, whenever there's a hearing on any form of legislation, that it comes before this board, because we have a right to know who you are. Thanks so much.
Good. Thank you, Karen. Thanks for being with us this afternoon, those comments. Okay. All right. Then let's go to our adjournments. I know Supervisor Frost, and then I have a couple as well. So.
Thank you. It's with sadness that I announce the passing of council member and former mayor Mel Turner of Citrus Heights. Mel was a good friend, and I'm told that he passed away peacefully in the wee hours of the morning. He was 67 years old. He died on April 20th. There was a ceremony, I believe it was the next day, the community in Citrus Heights gathered. There were over 100 people there, and they lowered the flag to half-mast and had a ceremony with the city employees and community members and community leaders that were able to attend. Mel was a dedicated public servant throughout his life. For 24 years, he worked for the state of California in the Department of Personnel Administration, the Department of Justice, and finally, the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation before retiring. Prior to that, he worked on as an adult probation officer in San Mateo County, where he received national recognition in crime prevention as the director of Capture, a countywide community-based crime prevention program. Mel continued to serve his community. In 2009, he was appointed to the Citrus Heights Planning Commission and elected to Citrus Heights City Council in 2010. From December of 2013 to December of 2014, he served as mayor and was re-elected to the City Council in 2014. It was Mel in 2012 who encouraged me to run for City Council. I was a community volunteer, and he was a friend who I met along the way, and so in a sense, he invited me to do something that I didn't imagine I ever would, or didn't see that in myself, and I have appreciated his mentorship over time. He is credited as the founding member of the Citrus Heights Police Activities League, a member of Citrus Heights Rotary Club, and he served on the Sacramento Metropolitan Cable Television Commission, and represented the City of Sacramento County Sheriff's Community Outreach Advisory Board. Mel had received his master's degree in human resources and organizational development from the University of San Francisco, and to help spread his knowledge, he taught at the University of San Francisco and the Sacramento City College as an adjunct faculty. He truly had a passion for people, for fostering youth, for the community. He waged a very courageous battle against pancreatic cancer over, I believe it was over a year or a year and a half. He was part of some very cutting-edge programs that I think probably extended his life. His last public appearance was in Citrus Heights when they kicked off the 20-year anniversary in January. And he is survived by his wife, Connie, of 33 years, and 2 children and 5 grandchildren. Mel leaves behind a city and a community that are better for his efforts and his dedication. He was loved by the entire community and respected as a leader in the region, and he will be deeply missed. And so I hope you will pray for Mel's family, and may you rest in peace, Mel, because we are going to miss you, and you will live on in our hearts.
Thank you, Supervisor Frost. And I think it was maybe by fate or a little irony that on the very same day that Mel, who you very aptly described, and we all knew him as a colleague in service, certainly in his civic service, but certainly his generous spirit. Then on the very same day that Mel passed away, we lost another colleague from the Rancho Cordova City Council, Dan Skoglund. And I think many of the things that you've said about Mel could be echoed about Dan as well. I think that willingness and interest in serving one's community, and both of them in fledgling cities that came out of the 90s and early part of the first decade of the 2000s. Both of them, but certainly Dan, I know, were longtime residents of the communities in which they serve. Turning to Dan just for a moment, I've known Dan for probably 35 years. He first moved to Rancho Cordova in the mid-1970s, and I know it wasn't too long after I started with the County of Sacramento in the late 70s that I met him. He was actively engaged in the 2030 Club and certainly the Rancho Cordova Rotary. And over the years, from time to time, would have a chance to meet with him at the Cordova Community Council at the time, and see some of his advocacy for the community and for small businesses. And he was employed with California Moving Systems for some 35 years. Graduate of Sacramento High School and attended Sacramento City College. But I think his interest in serving his community when the city of Rancho Cordova was established in 2003, I think sparked additional interest in Dan, and he stepped up when the first vacancy on the council from the when Dave Roberts, who was the first mayor, passed away suddenly. Dan had been appointed to the Planning Commission, was Rancho Cordova First Planning Commission was then tabbed to fill the vacancy created by Dave Roberts' unfortunate and untimely passing. He then went on to, as described in Supervisor Frost's description of Mel, he went on to be elected to that seat in 2006, again 2010, 2014, and served both as mayor and vice mayor in different capacities during that time that he served on the council. And certainly in the last couple of years, he was challenged with some painful ailments and had gone through some surgeries, and actually when he passed away was at home and with family. And I would just say, too, that he was, again, very a kind spirit, someone who cared about young people and was always very friendly and cordial, but certainly was every bit as strong an advocate for his community as anyone else that I've known from that part of the county. And his heart was in Rancho Cordova, and certainly he leaves a legacy of service, community service, and also leaves behind a family. His wife, Pamela, has 2 sons, John and Jeffrey, and a daughter-in-law and grandson, Benjamin, who I know he took a great shine to, and talked about him frequently in the last few times I've talked to him. So again, another big hole, and certainly in the fabric of our community, and we just echo the comments that our thoughts and prayers and sympathies go with certainly the Skoglund family, and we're going to miss Dan in his capacity of sitting here on this dais and elsewhere and providing leadership that he did in his community, but certainly in the broader Sacramento community. So I just ask if there are any other comments people wanted to add about Dan or Mel. I have one other adjournment that's, yes, Susan.
Just briefly, I knew both of them. I knew Mel just from his service on some of the boards that we sit on, and I don't think I've met anybody nicer who was on any of the boards we're on. He was always had a smile, a nice thing to say. He was really a prince, and I was sad when I heard that he had pancreatic cancer. I talked to Jeff Slowey a couple of weeks ago at a SACOG meeting, and he said they had a big going away party for him a couple of weeks ago. So that was really nice, and he was still able to talk to everyone who came to visit him. So he will be missed. And then Dan, I've known for 25 years. He's moved me, I just counted on my fingers, 8 times in 25 years. And I've recommended the company and him to many other people, and always did a nice job. Anyway, he was always just very cheery and, oh, don't worry about this, that's not going to get broken, and you know. And then he went on the city council, and I got to know him a little bit better. So very nice man, and I know his family will be stricken for some time in the council, so I send my sympathy.
Thanks. Phil?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too want to certainly lend my condolences to the Turner and Skoglund families. And I would only add, and I appreciate certainly all the very appropriate, heartfelt words of Supervisor Frost and Natoli and Peters. But I do think it's the appropriate situation to maybe let the viewing public know that those of us that do seek the voters' confidence and choose this lifestyle, and it is a lifestyle, to serve an elective office. We're a fairly small group here in the 6-county region. There's not a whole lot of us. Each of us serves on a board, commission, council, and then one of the biggest surprise to all of us when we run for office is we probably did not think that we're going to serve on 30 other boards and commissions, but that is the case, and so there's a lot of cross-pollination in terms of the people that you get a chance to serve with from different communities other than your own, and it's a great way to learn about those communities and in fact learn why the region is so special with the different challenges and opportunities we face daily as your elected leaders. And so when one of us passes, and then in this case, unfortunately, two pass on the very same day, it gives us a great deal of pause to reflect on not just our own, human condition and mortality, but certainly the sacrifices that come along with what we do, and there are a lot of them, especially as it relates to families. And so I think it's that much more important in a circumstance like this to let the families of those who have passed on to know how much we do sincerely appreciate the fact that you joined them in a decision for them to serve, and that came with time away from them. And it was for the broader good of their communities, and always sincere. And I think it's appropriate that we not only reflect on the great people that both Dan and Mel were, but also I just want to say on behalf of all of us what we're all feeling, which is a great deal of thanks to their families for letting them serve.
Very well said. Okay, noting again the wonderful comments made about both Mel and Dan, I just want to turn to one other adjournment, and again, kind of in a similar vein. didn't happen on April 20th. In this case, the gentleman, Jerry Strong, who was a pillar in the Elk Grove community. He was a lifelong resident, descendant of some of the pioneer families in the Franklin community in Elk Grove area, passed away on April the 9th. And Jerry, too, had a very courageous battle with a number of health ailments over the last few years. But I think in his inimitable way, not unlike others who struggle with certain health challenges, he never let it get him down, and he continued to serve his community in a fashion that was truly Jerry Strong. They had a service for him, a memorial service this past Sunday, and there were several hundred folks gathered in the Project Ride Arena in Elk Grove. And it was interesting that a couple of the speakers, and in fact, Father O'Connor, Monsignor O'Connor, made the comment that you can look around at people's contributions and achievements and so forth, and he said, and sometimes there are monuments and so forth, and he pointed to the arena and said, this is the cathedral that's a tribute to Jerry and his wife Jeannie, who were inseparable, married for 59 years, and their contributions to not just the physical arena and all the accoutrements there, but certainly to the program, which has served hundreds, if not thousands, of people with developmental disabilities and challenges, with a horseback therapy program that's renowned, certainly in Northern California, but probably elsewhere. And I can just tell you that his commitment to that program, because he also had a knack, and maybe along the way, each of us at some function, not so much in recent years, but he had the Red Oak Barbecue, and they did functions for Project Ride and the SPCA and for a number of different events throughout the community. And he understood how to cook for the masses, but also, for great numbers of people, but to make sure that it was always done to perfection and that it had that, the right seasoning and so forth. And you had this great, detail orientation. And they talked about it a bit too, that in some cases, if you were working a particular function or dinner, you might expect to receive, 3 or 4 calls a day from Jerry, just wanting to know if this detail was taken care of and if you had this silverware and did you have the seasoning for the beans and so forth. And yet he found time to do other things. He served as a volunteer firefighter for many years, as was noted, and certainly the Casitas Fire Department more recently was very near and dear to his heart, and actually gave him a final ride home from the hospital a few days before his passing. And there was actually a ceremony on Saturday where they had a horse-drawn hearse, again led by the Casitas Fire Department, to take him to his final resting place there at Hilltop Cemetery in Elk Grove. But he leaves behind his wife, Jeannie, again, herself a pillar in the community, a daughter, Geraldine, sons, Jeff, Jed, Jared, and Jay, a sister, and then many grandchildren and great-grandchildren. In a community that I really will feel the loss. His presence, although in recent years, due to his health challenges, wasn't able to get around as they liked to, but he loved horses, he loved farming and ranching, and was quite a prankster. And some of the things over the years, friends that had been with him on different fundraising expeditions or on horse rides and different things, relayed some stories again that were very, very humorous, but also showed the great sense of humor that he had, the great wit, but that he really loved his fellow human beings in so many ways, and he did it more broadly, but certainly with his family and large circle of friends. His loss will be felt for many, many years in that community, but certainly in our community more broadly. And so it's with a great deal, certainly, of respect and love and affection for Jerry and for what he meant to our community, and certainly to me as one of his friends, that we, again, just will adjourn here today and certainly send our sympathies and thoughts and prayers to his family, as we do to Mel's and Dan's as well. So unless there's anything else to add, then I would note that we'll adjourn today in the honor of Mel Turner, Dan Skoglund, and Jerry Strong. And with that, unless there's anything else, we will adjourn.
That's it.
Thanks.